Let's talk about the reading from Manuscript assignment. This is the handout or assignment here. This is a brand new idea for you. This was planned to be one of our regular presentations. At first you're going to think it's easier, but is it really than some other presentations? Maybe in some ways. We have to make some accommodations with our distance learning situation. We'll see how that goes. I'm giving you this assignment now relatively early, just in our second week after the break, and it's not actually going to be completed until quite late in the semester sometime. It's actually not that long, I guess. But the key point is that it's going to take a little time and some practice too. So I want you to start work on it sooner. Here's what it really comes down to. You can see the due date and so on here, and there will be a future Dropbox about that. You're going to find a poem that inspires you, something that you really want to present. Maybe you already are well connected to poetry. Maybe you have poetry in your life. Maybe not. If you don't, you're going to have to go research some poems. Either way, your goal, I've given you a couple links here and suggested that you might just Google poems to read aloud, 3-minute poems, poems for dramatic reading, variations on that. However you find, you already know the poem, you find a poem, your goal is to find a poem that you can read in about 3 minutes. Now, that doesn't mean read quickly through. This is a dramatic reading. You're going to read it with real feeling and emphasis. It's definitely going to be slower than the normal read. So we're not talking about a long poem here. That 3 minutes you're going to see in a little while is 3 minutes plus or minus 30 seconds, not just for the poem, but for the poem and an introduction. So once you find the poem, you're going to copy it into a Word document or Google Doc, wherever you like to work, and you're going to format it. You're going to increase the size of the type, increase the line spacing as much as triple space. Probably you'll have more than one page now. You're going to format the document. There, write and type. Do things like bolding and underlining or italicizing if you want to have different messages for yourself. I don't have any scheme for you to follow, like bolding means this and italicizing means that. You can develop your own idea of how you're going to annotate this. Afterwards, I think you should print it, and then you should add by hand, highlighting perhaps different colors, underlining there, maybe other notes or something. So you mark up this poem in ways to help you read it more effectively. More about that further down here. And then when you complete, after you complete the reading or whatever, I want a copy of that. I want a copy of that in the Dropbox with the recording of your presentation. And I want to see that you had a marked up copy. But there's something else. It's not just reading the poem. You're also going to do an introduction first from memory, or essentially says the same way that we've done introduction so far. You're not going to have this written down. The poem is written down, but your introduction is not. This introduction is probably less intensive than the introductions we've done before. The main reason is there is no preview statement. There are no main ideas to get to. This is introducing the poem. But don't begin with the poem's name or the name of the author. Begin with some attention-getting devices, at least 2 I'm asking for you for. You don't have to write this up and document it for me. I will hear you speaking it. The goal is to get our interest, get us going, just give us a little taste of what's happening, and then build to, after this attention-getting devices, build to the name of the poem and or the author of the poem. But you need to say both those things by the time you get to the end of the introduction. We should know the name of the poem and the author of the poem, and something else you've told us. You'll have to do a little bit of research perhaps on the author and or the poem. Something else you've told us that makes us want to listen. Then you're going to pause, and then you will begin to read the poem. Now, this will be reading, in a way, reading from paper, but you should be really familiar with it. And now let's take a look through this document here. More about reading from Manuscript. This is information from Nora Montanaro. This is oral interpretation. Communicating the written world Written word. Who does this sort of thing? Well, politicians, when they give a speech, those speeches are prepared, written. They're sort of reading it. We say reading from manuscript, but it's not so much reading as it is kind of like reliving. Lawyers do this when they give presentations in courtroom. Those are usually prepared ahead of time. Preachers on Sunday at church or synagogue or whatever might do this. Teachers, of course, broadcast journalists have a manuscript in front of them. And these things, this is when you read something, essentially when you want to produce the words exactly as they are written, I mean produce those words, you know, there's nothing ad-libbed here. It's because those words are so important. It's a formal situation. If you're giving a presentation to the UN or something else where especially there'll be written copies of it handed out, you want to say those exact words. Why do we learn dramatic reading? It's an excellent way to improve your reading comprehension. Reading great literature. So these aren't your words. These are fantastic words. Someone is really just taking incredible care for, a very talented writer. It helps you, reading those things helps you become a better writer. There's also, you might learn new words, new vocabulary. It's a delivery style that improves diction, the way you speak, because you're dealing with really nicely molded words, some really nicely created sentences, or in this case, lines of poetry. So you need to be familiarize, internalize, visualize. Familiarize. You study the manuscript, prepare orally, on your feet, think your way through the manuscript idea by idea. Memorization is not the goal, but you're supposed to become so familiar with it that I almost feel as if you are almost writing it. Okay, going through the same process that author did. Internalize. It's important that you internalize what you read. You make it a full body experience. Really feel the words. You probably should respond physically and emotionally and intellectually to the ideas there in that poem. Sometimes, as it says here, people read things as just like they're reading here from a page, like they're dead from the neck up. I just read that, but I tried to say that in a way that hopefully conveyed more meaning. Your goal is to experience the text from your toes to the top of your head. You're definitely going to read at a slower rate. It's a conversational tone, but it's not like normal conversation, really. I wouldn't actually even say it's a conversational tone so much as it is a living those words tone. Depends what those words are. Depends what the tone is of that poem, right? Give yourself and the audience time, pauses to absorb this literature. And you visualize. Ideally, while you're reading it, should have the images of whatever you're describing in the poem or what actions are happening there in your mind, and you're imagining, and you really will, if you do it properly, project those images into the minds of your audience. Not just through the words, but through that whole body experience that you're happening. So those images created by suggestion and through imagination that you're projecting can be really powerful. That's why, as it says here, and this is an interesting idea and one I hadn't thought of myself, when you're reading to children, you should read the story to them and then show them the pictures. Let them form the pictures in their mind first. That's your goal. You're trying to get that visualization to appear in the minds of your listeners. And then there's tips for creating your manuscript. You study the manuscript. You prepare orally using a slow rate. Prepare on your feet. Practice using a podium. Now this is going to be a problem. If we were in class, I would have a podium for you. And when you put those pages there, you wouldn't be holding them in your hands. But I don't know that you're going to have a podium. And I still want you to stand up when you do your presentation. So there is not an option to sit at a table. So what are you going to do? Well, you're going to have to hold the pages in your hand, I imagine. But the key thing is that you still have at least one hand to gesture. And then when you turn the page, if you have someplace to place the page, first of all, your pages are not stapled together. Your pages are only printed on one side. When you finish the page, if it were on a podium, you would simply turn it and then continue going. You don't have that, probably. So you're going to have to just turn that page and either put it aside or put it on the table, or perhaps hold it in your hands if you're holding it in your hands. Do your best there. Even though we call this reading, you are not really reading. you are still maintaining eye contact with the audience as much as possible. You look at the audience while making page turns and at pauses for certain. Type in triple space your manuscript. Easier for the eye to find a spot if looking at the words if they're not a bunch together. Triple is a lot. Double at least, I would say. Mark up your manuscript as we suggested before. Give yourself clues for delivery. Look up, slow down, smile, etc. Handwrite words. Okay, this is something that's useful to do, especially in a longer manuscript. Handwrite the words for the start of the next page at the bottom of the previous page. In fact, you should try this. So they're not typed, but the first few words of the next line, or even the next entire line of poetry, you handwrite at the bottom of one page, so that when you've already seen it when you're turning and beginning to talk. It doesn't mean you're talking continuously. It means as you turn and you're making eye contact with the audience, you've already seen that other line. You know what's coming. Number the pages so in case you lose track, or so you don't lose track. If you never type on both sides. Time your practice readings, of course, as always. Make use of color and the highlighting as you mark it up. Make a copy of your manuscript for the instructor. That's me. Bring to your presentation, but in this case, you have got to photograph it or scan it and send it to me. And finally, oh my goodness, this ended up with a blank page in here. I wanted to show you what is the rubric. But now you won't have a copy of the rubric, and you don't have to give me a copy of the rubric, and there's no forced practice with signatures on the back. But I still want you to see what you'll be graded on. Attention, creative getting, introduction, attention getting and creative introduction, which relates the poem to the audience and builds to the title and the author. That you're ready before that. It's almost like this introduction, then there's a pause, then the presentation begins. So that ready physical before talking begins both for the introduction, but also then for the regular delivery of the poem too. Make contact before reading the first line of the poem. Okay, so you're not just staring down, you make contact with it. Professional appearance, yes, smiling, balancing your weight. This is all very similar to your normal grading stuff. I'll be paying a special attention to rate. But this is not visualizing, internalizing, as I just described, familiar with the poem, maintains eye contact, builds to and stresses key ideas. There's still ideas in that information, so we're going to pass those along and stress them. Prepares audience for the ending. So your voice is going to change near the ending. You're going to slow down, and then we're going to feel like you've become at an end. And then I think it's really useful to be at the end to just be looking at your manuscript, pause, and only then look up, as is described here. And your manuscript, I need a copy of it, so that's listed here. Okay, so I've gone through that assignment. You have this on this document you can look through. You have a due date. So get going and find a poem and start to prepare. And of course, this would be videoed as your other ones will be with this new situation.